The Colts got the win today against the Miami Dolphins, but not all wins feel the same. This one comes with some much desired improvement moving forward. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for joining us for your first post-game listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are here to talk about a win, but it's not necessarily a win that gives you the warm and fuzzies. Welcome to it today. This is Jake, Arthur, and Zach Hicks at horseshoehuddle.com. So a 16-10 win for the Colts. They do move to 4-3 on the season. Houston lost today as well, and then they go head-to-head. The Colts are now a game back, so this can make things super interesting next week. But yeah, this was a big win, but a lot of wins. Yeah, but they got to do this, and yeesh. I mean, 16-10, it's not at all what it should have looked like. The Colts held a lot of advantages in this one. And the only true huge advantage Miami had was having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They didn't have the quarterback to deliver the ball to him like that, but that's like a clear advantage that they had. And the Colts shut those guys down to 2 catches. But everything else around them was so ugly. I mean, the defense kind of stepped up and did enough. The offense, we're going to get into more detail here, but my God, they didn't really find much life at all until the fourth quarter. This was Anthony Richardson's first game back since week 4. He has basically missed the vast majority of the last 3 games. Looked like he had some rust, but I don't think it was just him. I think some of this was coaching as well, Zach. Like, Richardson didn't deliver. There was a pretty big lack of execution from him as a passer, but schematically things just seemed just to not be functioning properly either.
Yeah, let me get the 2 quick positives for Richardson out of the way to start, and then we'll get to all the negatives with him and with the offense. And gosh, I mean, what we had to watch today when it came to this Colts offense. 2 quick positives, though. It is nice having a mobile quarterback where when you have a day like this, when the passing game is not remotely good, like whatsoever, at least he can supplement it a little bit with the running game. Like, it wasn't this elite rushing advantage that Richardson gave the Colts, but 14 for 56, converted, I think, 3 third downs with his legs in this game. That did help. It did help. Now, again, they dug themselves into the hole because of how in-depth the passing game was, but at least having that to fall back on to dig yourself out of these holes is an advantage, obviously, with the mobile passer. And then, look, again, for how awful he was for a majority of the day, those last 2 drives that the Colts had, I think he was 5 of 6 on his final 6 passes, got the Colts into field goal range on both of those drives, and the Colts were able to get enough points to win this game. Again, I like seeing that resilience out of him. We mentioned this in the Packers game. We mentioned this, honestly, just in general with him, where he has these games with the Colts so far where he's just been dreadful to start games. Like, this was a dreadful, dreadful performance early in this one, but doing just enough late to get the win. I'll take that at this age. Again, you got to see a little bit more. You got to see a lot more, honestly, but I am glad he was able to churn out some productive drives at the end to get the Colts the win. Now, getting to the negatives, though, it's just another inefficient day with too many 3-and-outs and really low success rate for this offense with Richardson at the helm. And look, I know progression isn't linear. You're not going to get better every single week. Sometimes there's peaks, sometimes there's valleys, and overall, you just want to move that mean up and up, and that's what the real definition of progression is. It's not always going to be this perfect rise into stardom, but you want to see at least a little bit of glimmer of hope in some of these games, and it's hard every single week now where we're just kind of grasping onto a couple throws a week rather than like, oh, this was a good week from Richardson. It's more so like, oh, here's like 2 or 3 throws from Richardson that were good out of the 24 that he threw. So it just was not a good, efficient day at all from the offense, from Anthony Richardson. I will say this game didn't really feel like there were too many like inaccurate throws, if that makes sense. Like we saw in the Chicago Bears game, a lot of throws going over receivers' heads, a lot of open receivers that were just not getting hit. in this game, it was a lot of pass breakups, a lot of throwaways, a lot of plays where he's getting hit and he has to just get the ball out of his hands. So it kind of, again, this whole game was more from a functional standpoint. The entire offense was not functional. Richardson, though, was not good. He couldn't overcome those issues, which is what you want to see out of your quarterback. And the Colts escaped with a win, but it was an ugly, ugly one. You have a stat in here that 9 of the 12 drives that the Colts had in this game lasted 5 plays or less, and they had 6 3-and-outs. Now, I think 2 of those drives that were not under 5 plays were near the end of the game, which got them the win. So that's the positive. But the negative is you had 9 of 10 drives, aside from the final 2 or whatever, where you couldn't get anything going whatsoever on offense. And that's ultimately down to the play caller and the quarterback. Like, those are the drivers of your offense. So, yeah, Richardson, not good enough. You want to see better play from him. We're in it for the long haul. So the long haul means the end of this season, maybe even the end of next season. But you want to see more flashes. You want to see more glimpses. You want to turn these flashes from like, oh, here's a couple good throws this week, despite it not being a great performance, into, hey, here's a good overall performance from him. Like, outside of that first game against Houston, which was far from perfect, we haven't really had a good Richardson performance, you know? And all the games we kind of hang our hat on are these games where he leaves early with injury, and we don't want that. We obviously don't want him leaving early in these games. So the Colts need better from him. He knows that they need better from him. He can't be missing the couple throws that he's getting that are open. He needs to be quicker with his reads, so maybe, you know, some of these contested balls are a little bit easier for his receivers, and the whole offense operationally needs to be better. So, yeah, it's a tough game to watch. I'm glad, you know, in an ugly game, I'm glad the ugly game was an ugly win and not an ugly loss, but it still doesn't make you feel good, you know? And that's kind of what we're coming out of this game with, where it's like, ugh, gosh, that was so gross. Just wash our hands of it and get away from it. That's 2 weeks in a row now against 2 really bad teams where the Colts kind of got out of there with like a, ugh, you know, like, let me just get away from this game and not talk about it again. So they're going into a brutal stretch after this, 5 games against really good teams coming up. They gotta win at least 1 or 2 of them to have playoff hopes alive, and they need better from their quarterback. They need better from their offensive coordinator. They need better from their offensive playmakers too. So hopefully this can get better going forward, and you can kind of scrub your hands of it. But not a good day whatsoever from Richardson, and it's not even something you can paint as a positive day from him.
Right. This feels like at least like the 3rd or so time this season where we've said, you know, this is Anthony's worst game so far, at least passing the ball. Honestly, I think it was probably his worst game passing, but arguably his best game running. He has really found a way to gut out those tough yards and just beat the defender to the sticks and pick up the yards that he needs to get as a runner. So that part of it is awesome. Like, so at least there's some part of it that's really functional. But just to put some more context to this, just brutally ugly passing numbers. 10 of 24, which is only 41.7% completion, 129 yards. His YPA wasn't good either, which it normally is, 5.4 YPA. No touchdowns, no interceptions, 59.2 rating. He did lose a fumble and, you know, nearly lost another one. And then rushing the ball, 14 carries, which might be a career high. I got to look at it. But 14 carries for 56 yards. So productive there. Lots of really positive yardage and first downs involved in that. So I'm with you. You and me have really strapped ourselves in for the long haul development of this player, obviously. So our patience for him is quite long. Our tolerance for this stuff is long. But you don't want every week to say, yeah, he's young, he's still developing, this and that. Like, you don't want to feel like you're holding off the horde of, you know, the people with the pitchforks and everything every week. Just like you said, it's got to be more than just these little pockets of positivity. And I feel like he really flourishes, not necessarily when it's too little too late, but it's like when they absolutely have to have it is like when he kicks it on. And it's like, dude, you got to go from like the beginning. Like, again, a lot of this is Steichen as well, and like the everyone else executing as well. But this was the first time in 3 weeks they haven't scored on the opening drive. You know, they'd been rolling. They'd scored on the opening drive all 3 weeks. You know, otherwise they got a ton of 3-and-outs. You know, 6 3-and-outs today. Even 2 of their scoring drives were among those drives where they had 5 or fewer plays in there. So It's like, one of them I think was like 11 plays, and that's the one where they fumbled in the red zone. And it's like these things are just the consistency is non-existent, and things are just kind of all over the map. But we're going to talk about kind of the supporting cast here in a moment and talk about the rest of the offense. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something that scares you? Me personally, I am terrified of this team going 10 more weeks without making some drastic improvements, but we gotta have hope in this thing, and that things are going to improve at least a little bit, and that it's not such wild peaks and valleys. But the scariest time of year is right now. Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about the fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. I've not personally benefited from therapy. I've not attended, but always open to it. I'm the type of person that struggles to make time for things like that. But you don't have to be the same way. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just got to fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime with no additional charge, because that's one of the biggest parts about it, is getting that rapport with a therapist, someone you can actually trust to kind of let your guard down a little bit. So BetterHelp makes that really, really easy for you. So overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, so the offense as a whole was really not great, Zach. Some guys who had been really consistent or productive in recent weeks, the ball either really didn't come their way or they couldn't turn their opportunities into much productivity. Michael Pittman and A.D. Mitchell had a couple, big plays. Pitt was 3 for 63. A.D. Mitchell had a couple catches for 30 yards. It feels like it's getting closer with A.D. Mitchell. The missed targets today weren't as off as they have been, but a couple of disappointing ones. And this isn't necessarily on these guys, but Alec Pierce had 2 for 15. And then Josh Downs, which is the worst one catch for 3 yards, which can't happen. I think he had 7 catches in each of his last 3 games coming into this one. And that's when the offense was really functional and moving the sticks and had some consistency to it.
Yeah, I will add that the Dolphins did a really good job of bringing Jalen Ramsey down on Josh Downs on a lot of these calls. Now, there were a couple times that Ramsey blitzed where the Colts probably should have got the ball out hot to Downs on the other side. And that, again, it's a young quarterback issue. It's a blitz pickup issue. It's a play caller issue. Like, something was off in this game. And a lot of it does have to do with the quarterback, but also with the overall operation of the offense. But for the most part, the Dolphins came to this game saying we're not going to let them get those easy early down stuff to Josh Downs by having Jalen Ramsey on him and then having, lesser quarterbacks, so to speak, on the cornerbacks on the outside on the other receivers. And the Colts couldn't really take advantage, and again, that's on the play calling, it's on the players, it's on everything there. I did want to mention with the play calling, though, that look, again, you were in the press box, Jake. I know it's a little different from the all-22 because you can't slow it down and all that, but it didn't feel like many guys were open whatsoever in this game. And I know the all-22 will be more telling. I can really go through and say, okay, this is what they were trying to do on this play, and the ball should have been out here, or you just can't get it here, so you have to go to your check down. But just watching in this one, again, there were maybe 2, maybe 3 Richardson throws that were off target to open-ish receivers. It just didn't feel like anybody was open. And maybe that's a full credit to the Dolphins defense. But again, when you hire an offensive head coach, I feel like you need to be able to design some answers, regardless of opponent. And it is at a disadvantage getting a team coming off a bye who kind of gets that advanced week to scout you. But you got to have some answers for your passing, especially for your passing offense. For a young quarterback, there has to be some answers. And a lot of the answers today felt like shotgun play action, long developing plays to non-open receivers. It just, there was a lot of these 3 and outs were 3 straight passes to passes that were 10 yards down the field, 3 straight passes, 3 and out. And it's why are we not I know the Colts suck at running screens, but let's get some screens in here. Let's get some isolation routes with, I know Downs against Ramsey, but you still trust your receiver a little bit. And there's just stuff like that. I felt like schematically, the offense just wasn't in a good place to succeed throwing the ball. And when you put that on top of Richardson, who was having a really bad day throwing the ball, it's a great way to get nothing going on that side of the ball. I will give them credit for a couple of their play calls, like end of the first half, like they had no business getting down there and getting 3. So whatever they designed on those plays to get all the way down there to get those 3 points, 2 open receivers on back-to-back plays is pretty big. The little trick play was nice the little check down to Sermon on the trick play was a nice little thing in there. I thought some of the run concepts, especially the quarterback run concepts, looked really good, but overall it was just like too little too late at times. Like I know they end up winning, so I'm not gonna say too little too late, but like so many 3 and outs, and it's like they brought out like these bag of tricks at times in the second half, but it was like you against a real football team that had a real quarterback on the other side, you'd already be trailing by a good bit in this game. Like you can't start this slow against everybody. So it just felt like, just from a whole procedural standpoint on offense, like outside of left tackle and left guard, I didn't see many positives on offense in this game. Oh, and Tyler Goodson. We'll talk about Tyler Goodson. I thought Goodson ran the ball pretty well, but he's pretty limited in how he creates as a runner. He's very much I get ball and I run straight really fast type of player, which is awesome. When he gets out to the perimeter, it's a really good thing. But besides that, man, this offense was tough to watch. It was a tough viewing experience. And I know we saw some boos in the third quarter, which, look, man, I grew up a Washington fan. I've seen worse. So, I've seen worse things that have warranted boos that didn't get them. So that's one thing I want to say there. But I kind of get the boos, man. I mean, it was a dreadful watch looking at the offense at times in this game.
No, and you're right. Normally, from this bird's eye view here, you could see guys breaking open, whether it's on rubs or just, they're being left alone in man coverage, or you could see guys, winning their matchup and getting downfield. But overall, I mean, Miami played really good defense. Like it boils down to, I thought they played really good defense. Their coverage was really good, despite, their problems generating pressure. I thought they did that pretty well. They didn't have Emmanuel Ogbah. Obviously, Jalen Phillips is out for the year. They didn't have Javon Holland either. So I thought the next men up for Miami did admirably well. It just was a clunky day overall for the Colts. It wasn't just Anthony. It looked uglier for him as a product of other guys struggling as well. He couldn't necessarily overcome that until very late in the game. But, I'm with you. It just I didn't see many missed opportunities out there. There was the Pierce overthrow. There was the really good play that Jordan Brooks made over the middle. That play that Anthony almost dropped into Kylan Granson up the seam. That might have been a touchdown. Just really good play. I just thought that there wasn't a ton of huge missed opportunities. I thought Miami just played some really good defense overall.
Yeah, it's just one of those days where you'd like to see some help for your young quarterback. Again, not excusing Richardson's play whatsoever. If we're grading this on an A to F scale, this game was like a D-. You give him a little bit of credit because of the quarterback running game, but besides, this was a dreadful game from Richardson. But it's another game where 50-50 balls. Were Colts receivers coming down with the 50-50 balls in this game? No, they weren't. A lot of pass breakups in this game. Were guys getting schemed open, or did the Colts have answers for a lot of the things the Dolphins were throwing at them? No. I mean, even looking at Ryan Kelly handles a lot of the blitz protections in the blitz pickups. Were they picking up blitzes in this game? No, they were not picking up blitzes very well in this game. So, yes, it's one thing to have your young quarterback struggling and not having a good game at all. But it's another thing to where, all these other players and people around them who should be good at, not good, I don't want to say should be good at what they're doing and not being good, but, who are getting paid like they should be, performing at a high level every single week, from the head coach to, offensive linemen picking up the blitzes to the pass catchers. Someone's got to pick up the slack when the quarterback's struggling. And I'm not saying that this game all of a sudden becomes some blowout win for the Colts if they pick up the slack, because again, Richardson had a bad day, but it was just another one of those games. It's like the Chicago game where it's nobody out here is making a play and nobody's really open. It's kind of on everything here. So we can look at Richardson and say, yes, this is a pretty big issue right now. We've seen the last couple of games we've seen of him outside of the beginning of that Steelers game have not been good games for Richardson. He is a big part of the problem, but we do need to start seeing other people stepping up and making plays for him. Michael Pittman Jr. made a couple big plays in this game. I will give him credit. When he got his targets, he made some big plays. But aside from that, Alec Pierce had a big drop. A couple other receivers had some tight catches they didn't make. Offensive line, I mean, again, left side of the offensive line was fine. Right side had some struggles. Braden Smith had 3 penalties in this game, like you mentioned. Ryan Kelly and Dalton Tucker were getting blown up in the run game at times. Like, just needs to be better from everyone else around the young quarterback so you can survive more of these, learning moments and struggles and stuff. I'm not saying that this needs to be the norm forever. Like, eventually Richardson needs to figure some stuff out, but while he's going through these learning curves and these struggles early, you need the other guys to carry him. And that goes from the play caller to the offensive line to the pass catchers. And if they're not all performing at top level or a very good level, you get days like this where the offense just can't do anything.
I really think they could use a heavy dose of Jonathan Taylor getting back in the lineup. I think that will cure a lot of problems. Like, again, not to go on a whole different tangent, but like with the run game, the holes are there, but the creativity really isn't. Like, guys are picking up the yards that are there to get without it being created. And you just don't realize how much you miss an explosive guy, a trendsetter, like early in a game, like Jonathan Taylor, until he's out like this. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and talk about the defensive side of the ball here in a moment. Some good, some bad, and overall enough to win. NFL fans, you can spark your season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You just got it pulled up. It's almost like your little betting hub. You don't have to flip through a bunch of different apps. You got everything you need right there. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet as well. So for this game, the Colts were 3-point favorites on FanDuel with a 43.5 over-under. The under was safe on this one. It was safe. So yeah, we'll see what is in store for the Colts next week against the Texans on the road. But that's going to be on FanDuel.com. All right, so I don't want to say a single thing about the defense without first acknowledging the prince that is Grant Stewart. Like, this guy, if you know you're going into a run-heavy game, I don't care. I want 3 Grant Stewarts in base defense. He got 18 tackles in this one. I can't remember the last time I remember a Colt linebacker having like 18 tackles. Darius/Shaquille Leonard had that as a rookie, like in his second or third game ever. Like, that's a ton of tackles, man. Like, this is a special teams player who no other fan bases around the league know exists other than maybe Tampa, because that's where he came from. Like, Grant Stewart with a hell of a game. It's because his hair is long, but he played with his hair on fire, and the guy is a Tasmanian devil, and the very first kudos of the day go to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Grant Stewart is, it's actually really funny because years ago with the draft guide I currently work at, I think this was the year before I started working at the draft guide, our guy who was doing linebackers had Grant Stewart as like the lowest rated player in the guide's history or something. Like, he did not like Grant Stewart. And I think a lot of that was like the coverage issues and how he's a very linear downhill player that just doesn't exist in today's football. And that guy was clearly a little too harsh on our boy Grant Stewart. Grant Stewart, fantastic special teams player. And this was a perfect game plan for him. Like you mentioned, like if you're dropping Grant Stewart into Big Ten football, and when I say Big Ten football, I mean ugly Big Ten. I mean like a bad Wisconsin type offense versus a bad Rutgers offense. Like, that's what we got today, was disgusting low end Big Ten football. We can't even put Indiana in anymore. Indiana's great, but we're putting bad Big Ten football into this. Grant Stewart is perfect. He will take on those lead blockers. He will mash a fullback whenever he can. He will kill tackles that try to pull around, and he will be relentless in his pursuit to the ball. So if this game proved anything, it proves that Grant Stewart should have been on the field in that Week 2 game against the Green Bay Packers when the Packers were running the ball so much, because he can thrive in games like this where it's run. We're going to run the ball 40 to 50 times or whatever the heck the Dolphins did in this game. Grant Stewart can be involved in a lot of plays, and he was fantastic out there. Again, I don't think this works like Grant Stewart, if he starts next week against the Houston Texans.
You're not going to do this next week.
Right. We're gonna have some issues, I think, in terms of just pass coverage and zone drops over the middle. But On the other side, when we're looking at this defense where the linebackers already struggle in pass coverage a lot, like really struggle in pass coverage, might as well just get a really good run defender on the field at Grant Stewart. Like Grant Stewart is the throwback 1990s Sam linebacker when they used to play base defense at like a 70% clip, and he just plays it really well. Look, there's not much upside to Grant Stewart on defense, but what he does bring you in terms of run defense and his physicality and his energy and hustle, if I were a coach right now, I would tell you, I wish I had a team of 53 Grant Stewarts or 52 Grant Stewarts, whatever, because that's the kind of mentality you want. You want just pure psychos on your team. And that is what Grant Stewart is. Like, he is a pure special teams demon, psycho that comes down a hill, plays physical, plays energetic, plays with hustle. And for a Colts defense that has been kind of lethargic, and I don't want to say the S word soft, with this defense, but a lot of people have been telling me that, I guess on Twitter, that's a soft defense. A guy like Grant Stewart's the kind of the Energizer Bunny out there, man. And it was really great to see him out there. So yeah, Grant Stewart, man, I don't think this works against like a real NFL offense, but in a game like this, where they're going to run the ball 40 times and not really have much of a passing offense, Grant Stewart, man, what a game. What a game from Grant Stewart.
Yeah, Stewart making a bunch of boomer dads fall in love on a Sunday afternoon here. His running mate today, Zaire Franklin, 16 tackles as well. So your tackles your linebackers having 34 tackles between them with a forced fumble. This game really came down to those forced turnovers by the defense, with the offense being what it was in a one-score game. Zaire Franklin really slash Stewart. I'll get Stewart and I think Nick Cross were in this as well. They forced a fumble. Shegu Alubi forced a fumble and recovered it.
Segun Alubi, that's our boy, Jake. That's our boy.
Yep.
We need to get more excited about Segun Alubi. That's our boy.
This is a For the Brand episode. Of course, the crappy thing about that is EJ Speed was downgraded to doubtful before the game with a knee injury, did not play. Jalen Carlisle left with an ankle injury, which was really the only injury of note from this game. So you hate to see that for those guys. But the next men up, stepping up. One huge thing about this, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, 1 catch each, 2 catches total, 19 yards. I know it's Tyler Huntley and it's Tim Boyle out there, but any quarterback with a pulse knows that you always have that option to just huck it deep. Right. And the Colts secondary did a really good job keeping those guys in check. I mean, Jonnu Smith murdered them, 7 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. But I think you give that up. You give that up in an effort to make sure those other guys don't kill you.
Well, I think this game shows kind of where the weaknesses are on this Colts defense, where in the run game, they devote a lot of resources to stopping the run. And it wasn't perfect today by any means, but they play Adam Gotsis as a defensive end. They play Grant Stewart. They have Nick Cross in the box. Like, they want to stop the run at all costs. And then the passing, I know this, again, not a great passing offense, especially with the downgraded quarterback. I mean, again, these are Big Ten football, high school quarterbacks or college quarterbacks essentially out there. So I'm not saying this is a great passing attack the Colts are facing, but kind of a strength for this defense this year has been their cornerback play and just their defensive back play and coverage. The issues when it comes to coverage has been the middle of the field with the linebackers in coverage, with at times the safeties in coverage as well. Like, that middle area of the field is really where you can exploit this pass defense, but Kenny Moore's been really good this year in coverage. Samuel Womack has been fantastic in coverage this year. And Jalen Jones has been a little hit or miss, but he's had the really tough assignments and he's had some really good moments. I mean, he had a really great pass breakup late in this game on Jalen Waddle. These Colts corners are going to get tested a lot over this murderer's row stretch coming up, these next 5 games, where they get CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, Jared Goff, and the Lions.
Devontae Adams and Amari Cooper just got dropped in. Thanks. That's
right.
Awesome.
Aaron Rodgers and then Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold and the Vikings. Like, it's a brutal stretch coming up for these guys. But what we all expected coming into the year was the strength being the front 7 and the weakness being the secondary. It's kind of been the strength has been the secondary and the weakness has been the front 7. Now, the front 7's had some guys playing well. Like Grover Stewart, I thought, had a fantastic day today. Taven Bryan made a couple plays. I give him his credit when it's deserved. Grant Stewart, again, had a great day. And the defensive ends, were fine in the run game. Got to be better in the pass game. But overall, the secondary has been pretty solid for this season. Again, they're going to be tested quite a bit coming up, and we'll see if they're for real in these next couple games. But I've been impressed by, I mean, especially by Kenny and Womack, but Jalen Jones too, like, is proving to be a pretty solid outside corner. Like, at the very worst, a solid outside corner. So hats off to the secondary, man. Hats off to the secondary. All year, it's kind of been like hats off to the secondary outside the Dallas Flowers snaps in that Jaguars game. It's been hats off to the secondary, and hopefully they can keep it up against better teams that can actually throw the ball. Because again, if we're talking about what the Colts basically faced in this one, they basically faced like Wisconsin's offense, like this was Wisconsin / Rutgers offense they were facing. And they did enough to win the game. I cannot complain about the defense after this, allowing only 10 points. The 2 turnovers were massive plays. I mean, like you can't even say how important those plays were, especially the first fumble, because it gave life to the offense for the first time in the entire game. So the Colts won this game on the backs of their defense. I don't care who they were playing against. They still won the game because of the defense, and that deserves credit. Gus Bradley, man, give him some credit. Gus Bradley, the guy that we all hate. I know the comments aren't going to give him credit for it, but like, look, you can't only get on the guy for the bad performances and not, pat them on the back for the good ones. Like the last 2 weeks, 2 bad offenses they played, but they've done their job in both games. So a win's a win. Now, no matter how ugly it is, a win is a win. The Colts got out with a win, only allowed 10 points. I will take it. Give me all the wins you can in the NFL season for sure.
Well, if I'm going to be a party pooper, I will say that I didn't love the run defense for a good chunk of it. 40 carries for 188 yards. Now, if you have 40 carries, you're going to have a bunch of yards. That just is what it is. Miami couldn't really do anything else. But I mean, there were plenty of broken tackles and guys not getting off blocks, and just there were a lot of really not necessarily chunk runs. There were a handful there, but like runs that did not need to go as far as they did, basically. But I mean, again, they came away with the 2 turnovers, which helped it not get as bad as it was. Tyler Huntley leaving the game with a shoulder injury and removing the mobile aspect of the quarterback play from Miami certainly helped. Tim Boyle is I mean, as far as passers goes, it's probably a wash, but Huntley obviously adds a dynamic with his legs that disappeared there. So survive in advance, man. I don't know what to tell you. The Colts are now a game back from Houston with a head-to-head matchup coming next week on the road. It's huge. It's a huge one. I mean, I don't think any of us are going to feel awesome about it going into it, but these teams play close. They do.
I will say, before the season, we circled 3 stretches for the Colts. First 6 games, which was kind of winnable, but also had some tough stretches in there. At Jacksonville, Houston, and Green Bay were tough games, and they lost those games. But they came out of that first 6, 3-3. That's exactly what we would have said before the season as perfectly fine. Now their next 6, now this Dolphins game was supposed to be in the next 6 of the Murderers Row games, of the really tough games. And they already are 1-0 in the really tough stretch that we identified preseason. So they can steal one of these next 5. That's my bare minimum I'm putting on there. Steal one of the next 5, maybe 2 if you want to get a little cheeky here, and then take care of business in that final 5 where we're looking at the Patriots, the Broncos, the Giants, the Titans, and the Jaguars. Take care of business in those 5. You can be a playoff team despite the inconsistencies at quarterback and all the injuries. I mean, every single player on this team is injured right now. They can still be a playoff team as long as they take care of business. So far, so good in terms of taking care of business in those chunk stretches that we mentioned in the preseason. It's all about stealing another game or 2 in this next stretch, because this next stretch, I mean, you play probably the 3 best teams in football in Buffalo, Detroit, and Minnesota. The Jets are, again, a sneaky team. In Houston, they're a little bit slumping right now, but like, it's still a pretty good football team that we're looking at with Houston. So the Colts got to at least steal a couple of these games if they want to be in the hunt for the playoffs, and we got to obviously see more out of this offense and young quarterback. But that's all we have for today, guys. We want to thank you all for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, go find the new Locked On NFL now with 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get the insider scoop, follow the link on our show notes. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube where we listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.